Hey folks, this is Samuel Heber from Samuel Heber on YouTube, Samuel Heber on Facebook, Heber Family Adventures on Instagram, www.samuelheber.net. I'm here with Rebecca Lake, who does a lot of great advocacy work in Canada, and she's dabbling here in the US. And I'm sitting down with her today to talk about what this dabbling is. Rachel, can you tell the folks a bit about yourself before we dive into that?
Yeah, so I am from Toronto, Canada. I grew up here. I am a serial entrepreneur, heart-centered entrepreneur, and I work primarily in the autism field. I have a clinic. My first ever business is Endless Abilities. We have a clinic in Mississauga, Ontario that offers ABA, IBI, applied behavior analysis, speech and language pathology, and occupational therapy, as well as music therapy. So we have a lot of services over there. We primarily service children who are age 3 to 12, I would say, or 2 to 12. And I also am partnered with a wonderful company that gives sells sensory toys and learning toys in subscription box form in Canada, which is the first in Canada. It's super exciting. They're called Sensa, so that's really awesome. And I have a really cool network on Instagram where I try to promote awareness, acceptance, inclusion, and I try to bring together families and individuals living with autism with other families and also other supportive persons such as myself or professionals in the field. So that's kind of what my mission is here, is to just build more of a community for everyone to allow better support.
Rebecca, that's quite a mission, and I love that your focus seems to be on community rather than just helping out individuals on the spectrum. Because something I like to say on this show is autism is not a disability; it's a community. And I think what you're doing is perfect, and what the autism community needs in any country really is a place to come together rather than this idea that we have to solve our problems on our own. That there are so many resources out there. So you said you're a heart-centered entrepreneur. What exactly is that, and how does that play into why autism, and why does it need this heart-centered approach?
Yeah, so I love that question. And everything I do has always been, I've always been a helper. I've always wanted to help people. So when I say heart-centered, it's my end game. Some entrepreneurs, we all have very different goals and different things that we work towards. I specifically work towards fostering relationships, building, meeting new people, helping people. That's what I thrive off of. That's what I find rewarding. At the end of the day, I would do this, for $0. I don't care. My happiness comes from, just the work that I do and the people that I meet, and everything, those relationships, that's what I get back in return. So I'm a very passionate person. I put my whole heart into everything I do. I'm the kind of person who's constantly, I always tell my families, you can always call me. I'm always there for you. I'm just a text away, or I'm just a phone call away. And I always stand true to that. So that's kind of what I mean by heart-centered. Everything that I do is all it comes from the heart, and it's just to solely make an impact and make a difference in others' lives.
I think that's just exactly the way to tackle it. Yeah, that really just comes from a heart-centered place, because we often are taught to think with our heads and follow a script, but we're often really not taught to how to connect with other people. Like, a lot of times people on the spectrum wear a mask, and and they try to act quote unquote normal, even though there is no such thing as normal. How do you encourage young adults on the spectrum to take off that mask and just be themselves? One of the things that I really loved about what you just said was you would do this for free, because often people on the spectrum think, oh, because I'm a man or a woman, I take this kind of job, but they're not actually passionate about doing it. And I think that's, like, in essence how that's how you know that you love your job is if you would do it for free. So what would you say to young people on the spectrum who how can they find something as passionate as you are about what you do?
Like, how do they find someone to be involved in their life and help them?
Or
Is that
like to
what you
find that
mean?
passion. I'm not talking about like finding
Oh,
that
to find
passion.
the passion. Yeah, things that even someone who's on the spectrum, it can be just so tough to find out things, like to even learn to socialize with society, to be able to meet people and figure out what they like what they do, so that you can get attracted to what they do. We're exposed to experiences in the world, and that's what causes us to be like, hey, that's really cool, I want to do that. So like when I got into this field, I was 15 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty nervous. I was going into camps, doing one-on-one, special needs camps. And as I got in, I met other people that motivated me to do what they're doing. So I think my advice to those individuals is to try to put themselves out there. It's very tough too, especially being on the spectrum. I understand that. But try to go and attend things or get out in the community and see what other people are doing, because that is likely going to spark your interest. Something's going to click where you're like, this is really cool, I want to do what you're doing. And then you kind of look to that person. Like I had a mentor, many mentors when I was 15 in these camps, because I was like, wow, I really want to be like you one day, like the other camp leaders and stuff like that. So I would, ask questions. I was trying to see what kind of path of schooling I would have to take, and I would get to know them so that I could one day become them. Obviously you're always going to want to be your own self. You want to be your own unique self and express that in any way that you know how. But when you're trying to find a career that you're passionate about, sometimes you just have to try different things, and you have to kind of take that leap, and get out into the community to experience that, so that you can see what you like. It's just it can be tough sometimes.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like a lot of people on the spectrum, myself included, spent a lot of our youth trying to plan out these experiences before we even had them. Like we already had these prejudgments on how it was going to go because we relied on our past experience that were similar, they didn't go so well, or we just always jumped to worst case scenario. What would be your advice for
Mm-hmm.
someone on the spectrum who has that fixed mindset that like the last time I tried, say, rock climbing, I fell and broke my ankle, and that's gonna now be the entire judgment I have for rock climbing. It's the place I get hurt rather than something I can have fun with. What would you be your advice for someone who has like that fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset about rock climbing?
It's tough. It's definitely tough when you have a mindset like that, because you're afraid of getting hurt again, or you're afraid of getting rejected again. And I think that practicing, first of all, being able to step outside of the box and break down that situation, that social situation, or whatever may have happened that gave you that experience, that negative experience after, and to look at it and think, what was negative that happened that day? I'm going to acknowledge it, that this is okay that it happened, and it doesn't always happen. But then also, what are some of the positives that I could have taken from that day or from that experience? Because oftentimes we don't see the positive because we're so zeroed in on the negative, and that's what's causing you to be more, I guess, hesitant to do something like that again, which is exactly what you're saying. So I would just try to look at it from a bigger picture. But again, like you were saying, sometimes people are very focused on that, and it's a little harder to. Charles decided to join us. It's a little bit harder to see from that point of view. But also, like I said, being open to trying new experiences, and being okay with the fact that, okay, sometimes things don't always go my way. And falling back on your community too. Community is huge. I am on so many different groups, on Facebook, on Instagram, and everything, and it's very empowering and enlightening to see families go on the group and say, hey, like this, I took my son to the social group and the kids didn't want to play with him, and it's kind of sad at first, and they're like, what do I do? How do I open other parents' eyes to say, to introduce their kid to my kid, or teach my kid that about neurodiverse kids or kids on the spectrum and things like that. And then when other parents start talking, they share their experiences, like, hey, this happened to me, and then we did this the next time and it was okay. So it's being able to share your experience with your community, and then although it's negative at first, and although other people also have similar experiences than you, there's also people that have had those experiences but tried again and they had a more positive experience. So that's more encouraging for you and is going to motivate you more to actually get out there again and put yourself out there again because other people have.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think that's exactly it. As Miss Frizzle taught us back in the '90s, take chances, make mistakes. And when you realize that every social experience is a learning experience, good or bad, it makes it much easier. And also recognize that this is not just for autistic people. This is how normal people actually learn. That they learn through experience. Neurotypical people do too. So like we're in the same boat, and just that me as an autistic person made me feel less alone when I realized that, like in college, no one knows who they are really. So it made it easier to connect with and sympathize and empathize with my peers. Um, but what about the social anxiety for situations that you've never gone into, like a new experience, like dating or going to college, living on your own? Like those are like the first big experience for any young person. But for
Those
people,
are terrifying. Yeah. I think that like with experiences like that, just like we do in therapy and stuff, it's kind of trying to desensitize you to that ahead of time. So experiencing it little by little in the beginning. So for an example, like going to college, which is huge on itself, or even living by yourself. Let's go with living by yourself. If you're able to set something up where you can slowly transition into that instead of just diving into it, while also having those conversations of what are the things I'm going to have to think about. Like when you're going to have to live by yourself, that's something that needs to be planned very early on. And that's something that some parents don't always recognize because they're so focused on the right now and what, like, maybe you're in high school and they're focusing on your success in high school. But when you pre-plan that and you try to at least start to have the conversation when you're like 15, 16 years old, you're not going to talk about it every day. Hey, you're going to go to college one day and you're going to have to live by yourself. Like that is obviously going to be scary. But as you kind of start to talk about it more, that usually helps to provide more comfort because it's like, it's coming. Transitions are huge. And it can be tough for adults as well. But even if you can have little experiences as you get older too, where maybe you have a family friend that will allow you to stay away from your parents' place for a week at a time just to try it out. And then you have that experience. So that's not always possible. Obviously you can't be like, hey, can I go to college for just 1 week and see how I like it? No, you have to go to, like, when you go to college, you're going to college. That's it. But trying to start ahead of time to kind of train your brain that this is what's happening and these are the things that I can do to better transition and get into this routine and this whole new lifestyle. But also, like I said, accessing your support system and also knowing trying to pair positive experiences with that. So when I go to college, this is going to be scary, but there's this really cool place that I can go to eat that has my favorite kind of food or something like that, where you try to pair, this is going to be scary, but this is going to be awesome. So you have more things to kind of look forward to so that when you get down into that like negativity, you can try to lift yourself back up again by reminding yourself of something that will be more reinforcing while you're there. That'll make you enjoy the experience.
Yeah, I think that's the huge part about college is like finding ways to associate positive things, like would be food, turning your dorm room into a mini version of your bedroom, so you have the
Yeah.
familiarity. Um, I think that's definitely a huge thing. But I think the other huge part of college that's scary is making you're the decision maker now. This is the first time that it's hard for both parents and their children on the spectrum. Like to allow your child to also make his or her own decision. A lot of parents still, hover over their kids through college and make a lot of the major decisions for them. What would your be advice to both parents and kids to, you know, for lack of better words, cut the umbilical cord and just allow your child to go out and have their own experiences?
And this stands for literally anyone.
Mm,
For like what I'm gonna say, it's you can't knock it until you try it. Honestly, as a parent, it would be terrifying to send your kid off to anywhere really, anywhere in the world. Like when I went to Europe for the first time, my parents were crying on the driveway, like, "Oh my gosh, why is she going?" But they couldn't stop me because I was like, "I am of age. I can do this. I want to experience this." So, first of all, with a person who might have a disability, regardless of whether it's autism or anything else, that are going off to college by themselves, there's so many resources in colleges as well that parents can access, but also want to be able to just to, I guess, have that peace of mind that their child's going to be okay without them, but to also be able to, first of all, let go. And maybe you start off in the beginning by having, like, I don't know how often people talk, but having 3 calls per week in the first few weeks, and then limiting it. Say, hey, like, I'm transition now, I'm getting comfortable. And then you go, okay, mom, I'm only going to call you twice a week, or now it's only going to be once a week, or something like that. I don't know how often people talk to their families. I'm very close with my parents, but college for me was huge too. Like, just going off, being by myself, I had to figure out the busing system.
mm,
Like, all I was thinking about was the prices for books and am I going to make friends? And that's kind of relevant for everyone. But allowing, first of all, recognizing as the individual going off that, hey, this is going to be a tough transition for my parents.
mhm,
What can I do to help support them while still having my independence? And that could be something like having those calls or having those check-ins every week to say, I'm okay. And sharing your experience to give them comfort that, hey, this is actually going well. And if it's not, that's also good to talk about with your parents.
mhm,
And then when you're kind of ready yourself, because it can also be tough as the individual doing it, being able to say, hey, I'm good. Like, I'm not going to call you this much. I'm not going to check in this much. I need my
mhm.
independence. This is kind of my time. And usually it goes relatively smoothly, depending on kind of the parents and just how paranoid they might be.
Mm,
But yeah, it's very different per person as well, how you may experience it and what their needs may be.
mhm.
So that's kind of what my take is on it. Charles. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it definitely comes down to, like, you're setting healthy boundaries with your parents. Like, this is how many times I'll call you a week to check in. If I need more, I'll be the one to call you. That's something really hard because we've leaned on our parents so much, special needs or not. But it's really how you take that step towards independence by setting boundaries. Like, that's a clear first step because everyone wants to be their own person. No one wants, no matter how bad your social anxiety is, to truly be dependent on other people. So let's talk a bit more about your clinic and your business in Canada. Can you tell us a bit about how you started that and what you guys do there? Because you mentioned all the therapy
Yeah.
in your intro, but you dive a bit more into more specifics.
Yeah. So um I started that 2 years ago. I think it's more than a little over 2 years ago, with a colleague of mine, or I guess a former colleague at the time, who was working towards getting his BCBA. So we sat down and kind of talked about our vision, and then kind of started up Endless Abilities together. And we started out as an in-home company, where he was the clinician and I was the behavior therapist implementing the programs. So in the beginning, it was very busy. We didn't realize just how busy we'd be. So within the first 2 months, we had to, you're trying to run a company and you're trying to be the frontline staff at the same time. It's nearly impossible. So we ended up hiring some people, and as we grew within our first 6 months, we were already getting a clinic because we had just grown exponentially. And then from there, we expanded a few times. Now we've got a full run clinic, which is great. Employees, benefits, all that jazz. So I never really thought I'd be at that point. It's really cool. We most of our referrals came from word of mouth. A lot of we didn't do much advertising on the internet. It was mostly parents and families referring us, which was really beautiful because they trust our services, and they it was just very the connections we were making were really great, and we continue to. Although it's gotten quite busy in the last year or so, we've been able to develop some really, really good relationships with families in the community. So we do try to be as involved as possible in charity, like charitable organizations and charitable work. We've done a few fundraisers, and we actually recently had a few of our staff come together to do a Baking for Change initiative, which was like a bake sale for the Black Lives Matter movement, which was also really cool. So we have very caring people that work with us. I'm very, very lucky to say that, and to have the team that we have. They're really, really compassionate individuals, and I'd like to think that they kind of are a mirror of the kind of person I am as well, reflection of the reason why I'm in this field and what I'm doing. So it's good.
Sounds like a really incredible staff, and I definitely agree. As someone who's in the field myself, and as an autistic person, it has to come from the heart, not statistics. Even though the numbers help in ABA and other kinds of therapy, I think just it seems like you and your crew just really focus on recognizing our humanity as people rather than trying to treat a diagnosis, which I really appreciate.
Oh yeah.
How has this changed your perspective on autism? Like going back to that 15-year-old Rebecca to now, like how has working in the field since 15 to however old you are now, like how's your perspective changed on it from
Oh wow. My perspective has changed like exponentially. It's crazy. If I think back to when I was 15 and I first walked into summer camps, I had more of a I want to say fear of going into it. Like I wasn't capable of being able to care for these individuals, or I wasn't skilled enough or qualified enough or strong enough. I was a little worried about that. I had worries, and I also I don't think at the time I really understood them yet as individuals. Like I didn't understand them from a I don't know how to explain it, but I think what it was that when I would communicate with them, I communicate with people with autism very differently now, because I don't communicate with people with autism. I just communicate with people. So I think that's kind of where my perspective has shifted, where I think we're all, regardless of our disability or whatever we may be living with, that doesn't make us who we are. It's something that's a part of us, that we're living with. And it's not something to look at as a negative thing, or I think that it's a blessing. I think that whichever way we're born, for me, there should never be any kind of I think the attitude I had before was different because I was uneducated about it. And I think there's a large population of the world that's so uneducated about autism, that sees it as they see the label and they don't see the person. They see autism.
Right.
And I think that including that all the time is just irrelevant. Like it shouldn't matter whether you have it or not. We're all human and we're all on the same path. We're all in this world together. So I think my perspective has shifted immensely when it comes to the way that I speak to people living with autism, the way that I treat people living with autism, the way that I talk to others about autism. I think it's more so I just want people to view it the way that you view autism, the way that I view autism. So yeah.
All right. Sorry, folks, about Terry.
We've both got barking puppies.
Yes. Yeah, that's the hugest thing is you go into the jobs. A lot of people they go looking for the traits of autism rather than who these kids are or young adults that they're working with. Like because you walk into those situations often thinking that I can see the way that they're stimming, they must be autistic. Like not really looking at this is Jeff, Cindy, or whoever. I think that's a mistake a lot of professionals make.
Well, my partner has said this. My partner has said this before, and it actually like resonates so much to me, and I think it'll resonate to you. But when you go to the park, you don't see a bald guy and say, or like my partner's name's Fatty. I don't look at Fatty and say, oh, the Fatty, the bald guy. Mm-hmm. Why should we be saying whoever the autistic guy? It's not relevant. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another thing that when we talk about labels, people, as soon as you put that label, that kind of that defeats. It just takes away from the individual. It's not fair to them because it changes people's perspective or perception of that person. Mm-hmm. We don't know how educated everyone is. You could tell me that you have autism, and it's not going to change any way that I talk to you or the way that I talk to my mom or the way that I talk to my best friend. But, as soon as you tell someone else that, then they don't have the same understanding as me or as you, that's kind of where it shifts. The conversation shifts or the perspective shifts. And I'm sure you've experienced that before.
Yeah, the experience for me really often is like when a lot of people find out they treat me more childlike, or they walk on eggshells around me. Like they'll never admit to my face what they're doing, but I've seen it enough where people just like their whole demeanor changes, and their octave in their voice goes way down, and
right.
And that's what's crazy is when I point that out, people are like, "How do you notice you're autistic? You can't even look me in the eye." I'm like I said, I listen to the pitch of your voice if I'm not looking at you, and I can tell based on that, rather than that's like I read someone's face is more through the tone of their voice rather than what their eyes are telling me.
Absolutely. It's very powerful.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, for going out of your way to message me and have the conversation. It's been really great.
Yeah, thank you for answering and coming on the show. It's really important. This is how we end the stigma. Everyone, as a public speaker, is asking how do we end the stigma is a huge thing. And I think just having honest conversations about things like being a young adult on the spectrum and what are our professionals like you seeing while working with people like me, and then me sharing our reaction to what you guys are doing, which is great. And that's something I hope they start teaching in psych courses that are geared towards autism, is seeing our humanity rather than checking off a checklist of autistic symptoms.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what I was trying to say earlier was the humanity portion of it. Mm-hmm. When I was younger, not understanding the humanity of it until I, of course, became more educated and exposed myself to those individuals and the environment. So I absolutely agree. I'm going to continue to be on your side and be in this community and try to raise that awareness and end the stigma. I do really appreciate you again for having me on the show, and we'll stay connected.
Definitely. I definitely would love to have you on a panel at some point, because I'm starting to do panels. Because I think it's also really important to hear from you guys, like not just read a report at the end of the day, which most parents do. They don't actually really speak to you that much, and also just getting to see who Rebecca is,
Absolutely.
rather than who your title is as director of your clinic. And this is
Yeah.
how we spread the word about your clinic, because that's one of the beautiful things that I love about the autism community is how quickly the word of mouth goes when there's a great person out there doing great work in the autism community. Like within seconds, you get phone calls. It seems. And
Well,
that's
thank you so much. I really do appreciate that.
hmm So if someone wants to get involved in your clinic, maybe like donate some money or their time, or get involved in some way, how can they do that? And how can they learn more about you?
Yeah. Well, they can go check out our website. It's endlessabilities.ca. There is a contact form in there in case you want to get involved. We do have volunteers. We typically do have them in person. However, if you're from anywhere in the world, we can do remote now because that's a thing. So I do have two girls that are working with me that are going to be doing remote work that just were interested in getting involved. And, we could do so much. We could build programs together. We're more than happy to work with anyone who is interested in being a part of our journey. And, ultimately, like I said, create resources, spread awareness, come up with new ideas to be of better help and make more of a difference in the community wherever we may be. So they can also email. The email's up on the website, but they can email over to info@endlessabilities.ca, and I'm going to be the one who's seeing that. So I'll send them over a personal email for myself, and we'll get in touch.
All right, awesome. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on my show. I'd like to leave it with one question I have for you, which is, if you could change the way the world sees autism in one way, what would it be and why?
Ooh, what would it be? I would honestly, I would literally take away the word odd. Like I would honestly take the word of autism away without having it be a diagnosis. Does that sound odd? In a way
No, it doesn't sound
that
odd at
people wouldn't
all.
be able to have the opportunity,
Mhm,
like in a way that people wouldn't be able to have the opportunity to
mhm.
judge others based off of that diagnosis. Um,
Right. I think that makes perfect sense, because like before we had the word autism, we just called people like me like eccentric or quirky, or just
yeah.
eccentric is my favorite word for it. And then those people
Now,
had jobs. Like Einstein had a job, Tesla, the guy who invented Pokemon, Tim Burton, like they found work. But as soon as you attach
exactly.
something like autism to it, it's like, I don't know if we can take a risk on someone who's quote unquote disabled. I'm like, you were hiring us when you called us
Right.
quirky and eccentric. Like, what's the difference?
Exactly. And I don't want to take away from the fact that having an autism diagnosis does absolutely help people
Mm,
to access resources and get funding and all that good stuff. There are reasons why we have it and why it is important to have. But I think just removing it from just so, people in society who don't understand it and who create those labels, or their perspective changes, like you're saying, when people talk to you and their tone changes or their whole demeanor changes. I think just kind of trying to remove that, maybe by taking away the word autism. I
mm.
don't know, on the spot question, but that's kind of what I came up with.
I appreciate you making an honest attempt to answer it, and I think you're right. Like everything needs his name, but in order to remove the stigma, it has to be more about something that describes the person and not something to be ashamed of, or um, shoved into a corner or a basement of a school. I think it's just
Exactly.
like we have to get back to just looking at our autistic children as children. Sure, they might hit development markers at different points than other children who are not autistic, but just let them grow at their own pace, and you'll see that they can do anything.
That's exactly, you're speaking volumes to me.
All right,
That's
awesome. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on the
great.
show, folks. I'm so sorry for my yapping dog. But this has been another episode of Heroes of Autism with Sam Heber, and my guest today was Rebecca Lake. Check out her clinic in Canada, and as it spreads in here into the U.S. we'll hope to have Rebecca back on the show soon for our panel. Until then, this is Sam Heber signing off.